Still? Yeah, thank you. We're so much. We're so we, but we're by, where, I took the grade. Oh, you did, okay. I mean, they're not what I had in the house. I didn't know you could go get watching dryers that weren't digital. Yeah, I mean, I just first washing dryer and. I love it. Does you break? Well, the problem is they don't clean well. If you have a spot, you better clean it before you get it too much. It's just the supervisor was kind of. Yeah. When I put my first leg, what's your? They don't even get it. That's what the whole. Right. Well, not right. We had special ones, big ones. Yes. I recognize the first stories. So, first lot, I'm not well, when I was in this code. So. So where was your house? Yeah. And just behind the police station. Somehow, can you do it? What do you think? There's a meeting. Who was? It's pretty. You're saying something. Mara. No, nothing. Yeah, it's yeah, Mario. Yeah, it's why. Okay, yeah, they're neighbors. I don't think. Yeah. Yeah, we like that. Well, most of that now. You really have to voice the criticism. Yeah. Or, yeah, we have to wait until it's permitted and then for our routine. Yeah, for some time delayed because Excel was all over. So, and then we had two of the light posts. All four corners. No. Oh, okay. Yes. The pressure. Yeah, our neighbor told us. I used to overstay our house and never been there. That's where starting. Right. That's even saying that anymore. Yeah. Yeah, I never said. I don't know if they were attempted on our side or not, because they were trying to save the first stuff. Yeah. It's a good one. I'm just here to like. They have that. You all hear from it.
like, you know what I mean, right? Like, yes, right? Like, we're just really. And then I can there's yes, yes, we have such a nasty night out. I know, we've got 21 out. We can open this up. We thought it might help us. And then we can open it if we need. Getting our head out.
Because I laughed at you.
Good. Yeah, we're gonna have more. We're gonna have. The thing that you are. The last one. I know the right. Wait, yeah, exactly. Well, that's what.
All right, should I get started? Yeah, I know you're on an end with 336. Do you think we don't need a microphone?
I don't, this will pick you up. I think it's up to them if they want to.
We've got a couple of people still trickling in, but we have some folks on the webinar as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Welcome. We're happy to have you here. We're really looking forward to this program, which is the first program in our 2013 disaster education and outreach series. So there are numerous programs still to come. I posted up here the programs that we have up and coming, and you can see we have a couple of different kind of educational type of programs, informational type of programs to give you updates on what's happening in the community around some of these issues. And then we also have some items included on here, the wildfire risk assessment, which is associated with City of Louisville's wildfire risk assessment, which is an assessment that's happening on City of Louisville owned public lands around wildfire risk and the potential mitigation options for those properties. So this is a series that we put together jointly, the City of Louisville, the town of Superior, and unincorporated Boulder County. And our three communities, as you know, have been all working together really closely over the past year as we've been recovering from the Marshall Fire. And as we started to move towards long-term recovery, we really wanted to bring together our agencies and the community to work together to improve our preparedness.
Not sure folks on my ear, so.
Okay, so, okay, this is better. All right, I'm going to try not to talk too loud now, but hopefully you can hear us. So our three communities wanted to work together in conjunction with the community to really improve our preparedness efforts and learn from experts around wildfire mitigation, emergency preparedness, and other topics that might help us become more resilient communities. So we are going to start this evening with one of our first programs, which is around community wildfire protection plans, CWPPs. We will try to reduce the use of acronyms and explain what any acronyms that are used are, but I think you're probably all aware in this sort of field that there are a lot of acronyms. So please just raise a hand if you need something that's an acronym or if you kind of point it out to us. So tonight we're going to learn a little bit more about what community wildfire protection plans are, how they're used, and why they're important to communities in planning the potential impacts of wildfires. So just a couple of kind of housekeeping items I want to share. The bathrooms are down the hall and to the right. There's drinking fountain down there as well. We are going to take Q&A at the end. So we have two speakers this evening who are going to give presentations, and then we'll have the opportunity for our fire chiefs to speak for a few minutes as well around this topic. We are recording this as a webinar, so if you know someone who wasn't able to attend or you really love it and you want to watch it twice, you can do so. We'll have it posted online. We will take some questions, Q&A also from folks on the webinar. So if people have questions, we'll try to kind of intersperse those questions. And if you're not familiar with where this information is available. Oops. Sorry. So on the City of Louisville website, if you go to the top banner that has the Marshall Fire banner and click on that, on the left-hand column, there's a series of topics. The Resilient Louisville is where you can click to see the programs that we have, to get the Zoom link for those if you want to attend future items or programs. And also we plan to add some more. So we're kind of working on some additional topics. If you have ideas, please email the City of Louisville or Town of Superior, unincorporated Boulder County, and just let us know if you have ideas that you think that would be of interest to you. Okay, so let's move to the program tonight. We're very grateful to have two experts around community wildfire planning and community wildfire protection programs. We have Ben Fole, who's the supervisory forester for the Boulder Field office for the Colorado State Forest Service. And then we have Meg Halford, who's the senior forest health planner for Boulder County. Again, at the end, we have Chief John Wilson here, who's the Louisville Fire District Chief, and then Chief Keith Long at Mountain View Fire Protection District. So they will share a little bit about what's happening in the community around CWPPs as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ben.
Megan, real quick before Ben gets started, I see a hand raised in the audience. I just want to take it just in case there's a technical challenge or something happening with our online audience. If you don't mind, Rocky, if you want to share your question. If not, we'll take formal questions.
We can't see the screen.
We will start sharing our screen in just a moment. So we have.
Okay, thanks.
We'll do that now. Okay, thank you.
All right, I haven't used a mic that many times, so bear with me. All right, so before I get started here, I'm going to put a plug in for probably one of our most popular and used publications, the Home Condition Zone Guide. It's what you can do around your home to keep your home safe. I'm jumping ahead here. You guys are gonna have third or fourth in this series of talks. That'll be the topic, but I did bring some tonight if you want to take a moment and read. So
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so thank you. Happy to be here tonight. I applaud you guys for putting this together and having this opportunity. My name is Ben Fole. I work for the Colorado State Forest Service. We are part of Colorado State University. You'll notice our logo looks a little similar. We're the state forestry agency. So the big difference between the State Forest Service and the U.S. Forest Service is the U.S. Forest Service is involved in federal land management, the National Forest out your back door. We, on the other hand, we work with, well, we do work sometimes on federal land, but a large part of our job is working with all the different stakeholders in the state. Our mission is for the stewardship of forests for future, current and future generations. So we work with private landowners. We work very closely with counties, with fire protection districts. We do work with the U.S. Forest Service. In my particular office, we work in Boulder and Gilpin County on all things forestry and fire related. So tonight I'm the first chair. I'm going to give you a broad overview of what a CWPP is, just in case you've never heard of one, kind of the process we're going through and what you should get out of a CWPP. So, oh, you can stay there. Yeah. So CWPP, keep using that acronym, Community Wildfire Protection Planning. So big thing there is community, and this is a planning document to start with. This came about in 2003 from the Healthy Forest Restoration Act. So this was born 20 years ago, this idea, built upon efforts before that. So this came about recognizing that community plans and priorities have an important role in shaping management on federal and non-federal land. So for most of us in this room, we're interested in what to do on non-federal land a lot of the time. Really supposed to promote cross-boundary action. We all know that fires really don't care about land ownership boundaries, right? And the intent is to engage all the branches of local government. But we'll go beyond that here soon, because really at the core of this, it's the community, right? Not the government entities. So kind of hit upon this already. I'll repeat it a few times. But the requirements, the core requirements for CWPPs is that there's collaboration. That means people need to engage. You know, it's our job as officials to try to seek that engagement, but it's also your job to engage within your community. One of the big things to come out of CWPP is one of the most important things that you'll get out of it is a prioritized list of what needs to be done. So you can kind of develop a place to start. And then back in 2003, we all know this now, but in CWPPs, you need to address how you're going to, the methods by which you're going to address structural ignitability. And that's key for you all.
What is HFRA?
Yeah, sorry. I tried to take that acronym out.
Oh, okay.
Helping Forest Restoration Act.
Oh,
yeah.
thank you.
Sorry. There you go. All right. So some of the key things still with the Helping Forest Restoration Act is one of the first things the community does. Well, what is the wildland urban interface? So I'll use that acronym later. The WUI, you've heard that a lot. So each community needs to identify what is their WUI. Where is that line between what is pure wildland fire and where that interface is? Down here, you all experienced that with the Marshall Fire. It's much more than what we used to think. It's also one of the fastest growing elements in my profession is with more and more homes built and then more and more fields growing, our definitions of WUI are growing. One of the other key elements is for why to develop a CWPP. It helps federal and state funders determine where to put funding. So having a CWPP with prioritized projects helps to put the funding in those places. And then the other thing, again, just back to the ownership that you have as a community is the idea of a CWPP is to put the ownership of where to put work on the ground, and that's driven by the communities. All right, so I already touched upon this, but I'll just reiterate it. The Helping Forest Restoration Act gives communities the opportunity to identify their WUI. I don't know, but I think before the Helping Forest Restoration Act is a pretty rigid definition. And we'll get into it later with the steps. This is one of the first steps you do is identify where's your WUI. And again, one of the key elements out of the CWPP is prioritization. I'm repeating these things for a reason. This is a little bit old because it's more than just the U.S. Forest Service and BLM, but it gives our federal land managers an idea of where they should put their projects, where they'll work in conjunction with what communities are doing. And then key thing again, community wildfire protection plan. The HFRA made the CWPPs so communities know it is their responsibility to help protect their community with land managers and firefighting agencies. So here's the dry part of the night. I'm just going to walk through kind of the steps of how you go through this. Meg speaking after me, and she'll speak more to how the county is actually going to do this for the county CWPP. But at the start, you need a core group. The minimum requirements that you have the local fire authority, the local government, and then the state forestry agency is there to sign as well. For the most part, my role and my agency's role is just to make sure that these requirements are met. That's kind of a minimum. But then we help guide what the decisions are, how you do the assessments, and a lot of the other steps. So the key thing here is to keep the core group. This is the management group that's driving the CWPP through the process. Those are the minimums, but you can make that for your community. You can have that group be as large as you want, but usually, or at a minimum, you just need those three entities. So again, this is a little outdated because it's more than just federal and state agencies. But it is good to get folks like myself, folks like the county, the fire protection districts, and then around us, the US Forest Service, where there's large parts of our county with federal land. Convene those entities to use the expertise that they have and the data sources they have, and their knowledge of the landscape. This is the key part right here. Is that group, their job is to engage their community. So, you know, I have some things listed here. It's going to look different for every community. It's going to look different here than it is going to be in Netherlands. So this is the key part, is engaging people and getting all that input and perspectives. So step 4, you get into, this is where you're identifying your WUI. This is where you sit down and say, here's where our homes and our infrastructure intermix with, you know, what we typically see as, you know, wildland fire or the forest. And this for a lot of us it's much more easily done nowadays than it was 20 years ago. A lot of tools are available online through a lot of different entities, including us. But the key thing here again is identifying where your WUI is, where your communities are, where your infrastructure is at risk. And then right along with that is doing a risk assessment. So that's going to be crucial for a lot of our communities now, where our understanding of risk is changing. Marshall Fires informed a lot of that. So this is where part of the risk assessment, you're taking account of all these different elements. One thing that's been pulled from this in our most recent requirements is the preparedness and firefighting capability. It's gone from a must-have to a should-have, right? Most CWPPs are going to have this element in it, but I just crossed it out because it's no longer a requirement. Then, like I said, besides engaging, it's identifying where I have fuels treatments on here. But this is the part of the process where a community can look at the risk, look at where their WUI is and say, okay, what are we going to do about this? A lot of times when you're not in the plains and you're up in the mountains, this is identifying what sort of treatments and what effect are they going to have on fire risk. Where do we put those treatments? And then we start to prioritize them. And then again, the bullet about recommendations for reducing structural ignitability. A lot of times that's not a fuels treatment. A lot of times that's going to be an educational campaign or implementing programs like Firewise, where you put the power and the education in local community groups to say, hey, this is what we need to do to save our homes. And a lot of times that's not cutting trees. And then, so this doesn't become a plan that sits on the shelf. One of the last steps is developing the action plan and the strategy by which you're going to implement the plan. Timeline's key. Any more funding needs? A lot of what we recommend costs a lot of money, especially when you look at private property, more so up in the forest. But for the folks down here, it's how do you get the funding to change out fences? How do you get the funding to clear out ditches? How do you, in the mountains, get funding to cut a lot of trees? All right, so last step, finalize it, get it out in the community, get it out to the people that it affects. So so there were a few updates since the 2003 inception of CWPPs. I believe 2009 was that when we required counties. Yeah. So the county plan was done in 2010. Yep. 11. Okay. Yeah. So there's been some iteration since 2003, but there really hasn't been an update. The states set the requirements, and there has not been an update until last year for Colorado. What the key updates is that any sort of participation by communities, all that engagement piece of the development of this plan is it needs to be documented. So people know, so that when I go to sign this document, I know that the community was engaged. Seems small, but it's big. I touched upon this already. They removed the community preparedness and response from the requirement. And then there's a lot more should and may language, so we'll get into that next. All right, so I've already gone through a lot of this. I'm not going to repeat it. But these are just the list of musts. Meg's going to talk a lot about this in her presentation. For a lot of folks in this room, I'm going to go ahead and assume this is one of the key ones. Is the methods by how you're going to reduce the ignitability of your structures. And then key to this is the implementation plan to make sure this gets done. You find who's going to do this and when they're going to do this. You know, you might ask, well, we don't have trees to cut down the plains. That's fine. So there's other ways to reduce fire risk. And sometimes that might be identifying educational campaigns or how you work within a community to let people know how they can get the work done. So for a lot of you here, you know, you might not be doing fuels treatments in the traditional sense that I know it. But in the implementation plan, you do have to have those projects prioritized and listed and on a map. And then just some more of the language, shoulds and mays. We might get into this tonight, talking about this isn't the only plan. There's countywide hazard mitigation plans. Some of you might be aware of those, but community wildfire protection plans are they're fire-based, they're wildfire-based, but there are also other hazards you face. So the county hazard mitigation plans, a lot of times talk about doing the same things. And a lot of the wildfire mitigation that you can do can be spelled out in a hazard mitigation plan. So there's opportunity for overlap with some of these planning documents. So kind of a segue to what Meg's going to talk about. The level of specificity. So what size of a community are you writing the plan for? You know, up until 2009, most plans were done at, you know, very small community levels, fire protection districts, you know, towns within the mountains. But starting in 2009, we started to look at plans at the county level. And a lot of that's driven by what the local need is. And then the resultant recommendations are specific to that community. So the large plans, i.e. the county plan, they need to identify the landscape fuels treatments that are the highest risk to the communities. So Boulder County, all the communities have had CWPPs developed. More to the west, the county had a CWPP that covered the county in 2011. But within that county plan, the plan is to incorporate all those individual community plans and list out all their projects. This comes into play when you look at, well, I'll talk about it next, but any of our federal and state funding sources are really only going to fund projects identified in CWPPs that aren't outdated. So most CWPPs locally and across the state are at or older than 10 years old. So there's a huge push right now to update CWPPs, rightfully so. And then that comes into play with the funding. So it's recommended every 5 years. I've heard some people are aiming to do their updates every 2 years. You don't have to rewrite the book, but things change. Things change over 5 years and definitely over 10 years. So this language was pulled, will not be prioritized when considering for competitive funding opportunities. This is the big one right now. Is like I said, most of our state and federal funding sources to try to get this work done are not going to fund or will not prioritize funding for projects listed in CWPPs that are old. I'll skip this last one. But as CWPPs are updated, the document does need to be recreated, but the key thing is to list what accomplishments have been done since it's been written, and updated risk. That's very pertinent for you all, is what is our understanding of risk and how do you address that? And that's it for tonight. And then I'll pass it off to Meg.
Question? We were gonna wait till the end and kind of do like a panel. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, so kind of rush through it. I'm more interested in the questions and the dialogue that comes after this. So we got through the dry part. And
Well.
this is just how you do it. So
I'm new to the mic too, so hopefully I don't break out in song. Anyways, I'm Meg Helford. I'm with Boulder County CPNP Department, Senior Forest Health Planner. I've only been here for 10 months, but I'm not new to this world. I actually came from the Colorado State Forest Service, was there for about 18 years. I was the supervisory forester in Douglas County for across 4 different counties. So my focus there was working primarily with private landowners, right? Also really outreach and education. So I'm hoping to bring that skill over here to Boulder County. Somehow they stole me, don't know how, but they did. And so I hope with the disasters and all the events that have occurred in Boulder County, and the most recent one, the Marshall Fire, that we can bring something lights to the Eastern Plains, right? We have to shift. And so before I go into the CWPP, kind of hitting on that, so you understand the challenge, we're still trying to keep up with what's going on with the mega fires going on in the West, right? We're still trying to go, how do we keep up with that? And now the Marshall Fire happened, and that's not new to the United States if you look at California, right? If you look at the Camp Fire, they lost over 10,000 structures, hundreds of people, right? In that fire, that was kind of in a community like the Marshall Fire. And so we have to shift our thinking. And the county is doing everything that we can. And one of the things that we're doing is updating our CWPP so we can address these new challenges here in the East. So we can bring those services and figure out what you all need so that we, over the years, can help try to prevent. And just keep in mind, you know, that was a unique day in winter with 100-mile-per-hour winds. We had the fire, we had the fuels, we had the winds, right? So that was a unique day, unfortunately. So we want to be prepared and we can recognize what we can do so that you're all situationally aware and prepared. If something happens, you're like, okay, I know what to do, right? So with that, we'll carry on. We are updating up in the mountains, right? But I would encourage you all to go online and take a look at the electronic copy of it, so you understand what goes into a CWPP. We're calling it an update, but I believe because so many things have changed here within the county and so many things have happened, it's going to be pretty much a full-on plan, because what we need to include in that is really focusing on our eastern neighbors.
So I don't expect you to read this, and a lot of what I'm gonna tell you is gonna be redundant in what Ben told you, right? But this is my checklist, right? And this is what we're going after and I'm working on currently. You don't have to read it all because I'm gonna go through it in the next slides. So as Ben mentioned, there are different levels of CWPPs. And the countywide is what we call a 10,000 foot view. It is broad, right? If you go down into an agency, maybe they include, you know, we have 5 neighborhoods and they include that broad look. If you get down into the communities or the fire protection districts that include the communities, that's going to be more of a local granular assessment, right? They're going to go, okay, here's our neighborhoods. We have 1,500 homes here. Do we have an egress? Do we have an ingress? Where are our most high hazards coming at that community? So that's what that lower level is. Ours is going to be that wide view, but it's going to inform a lot, right? And really what we want it to do is act as an umbrella. We want it to empower communities and organize plans and take action. We want to create folks in the communities here to be spark plugs, right? You may go, hey, our community doesn't have it. Maybe we go talk to our fire protection district, or maybe we form, you know, a wildfire committee within our HOA to go, hey, do we know how to get out of here when an event happens? Hey, do we have an outreach and education program? So we really want this action that we're doing on the county level to spark your interest and you becoming the ambassadors. We want to enhance the levels of resistance and protection. And we obviously, like Ben said, we want to identify the risks of the wildland urban interface. And this, we're going to identify strategies, right? And so the plan for our CWPP is not only to list, oh, hey, we need to do a fuel break over on that ridge by Netherland. We want to make sure that we're identifying in the local municipalities, hey, we need to identify some outreach and education programs. We need to do this, we need to do that, so that it's identified in the plan. And while you're trying to buy time, maybe, since it's identified in the plan, someone can apply for some state, federal, and local grant monies, right? And it can be outreach and education. It could be a fire district going, hey, we want to do some treating of these ditches in open space. We want to do some wildfire home assessments type situation. So this will really give opportunity for funding and services and support, right? Not just for the West, but out to the East. So it's gonna incorporate a flexible and adaptive management process, right? Things always change, and this process is not a quick process. Everybody, we're gonna update our CWPP, and they're like, oh, are you gonna have that done in 2 months? Yeah, no, probably gonna be 6 months, year probably, if we do it right. We have a lot of data to collect, and we want to make sure that we hear all of you and what you want to see in the plan. It's going to include the forested WUI and the grassland WUI, or as I have coined it, the grassland urban interface, right? Everybody, we have to do that now. You're all a part of the wildland or grassland urban interface. Anywhere where structures meet vegetation, you're in an urban interface and have threat by wildfire. Okay, it's going to be a collaborative process, and that's the key thing that Ben tried to drive home. We're going to have several public meetings, and we want to hear from all of you. Not going to go through all this, but you're going to see who we have. I've already put together our core team, right? We're gonna have Boulder County lead, which will be myself. We will have our GIS folks. We'll have Parks and Open Space. We'll have the Colorado State Forest Service. We'll have representation both from Western and Eastern fire districts. We'll have the U.S. Forest Service, County Sheriff's Office, OEM, City of Boulder Watershed Group, and municipalities. A couple of folks here in this room. So we have representation for the Eastern folks, right? Back in the olden days, when we did CWPPs, was really representation. Yeah, we go out to, you know, the urban areas, but nobody from the urban areas showed up, right? So we have to shift our efforts now, which is fantastic, and include you so we can hear what you feel are your threats. So this is what we're gonna do, right? We're gonna engage the public outreach, right? We're gonna conduct a public online survey. And I will push that far and wide. There will be an FAQ on CWPPs, but it's really important that you take it. We won't make it laborious, right? Probably drop down menus. And if you really want to go off on it and put a lot, we'll have a comment box, right? We'll probably post that for more than a month and get that up on the site. We are going to host several public outreach meetings geographically, right? So we're not, again, back in the olden days, we do it so Netherland or Jamestown or whoever up there in the mountains could go. We're gonna service those folks because they're still important. That's our drinking water and our watersheds and our environment up there. But we're also gonna be coming down here, right? So we want to hear from you. And we're also gonna have them facilitated so that you're not all sitting here listening to us and kind of going, oh my God, CWPPs. You're going to be getting up and giving us comments, and you're going to be giving us input, interactive, right? We're going to have county maps, and you can see those. The one on the right, I'm sorry, that's so small. The one on the top up there. But this is a map, and those colored polygons on there are completed CWPPs, right? We want to get more of those. We're going to have one color over the entire county, but we're going to use different layers that we already have implemented. And we already have a Boulder priority focus map area. Does that focus on the west right now? It does. Again, we still have to put our efforts up there, but with our new hazard assessment that we're going to do, which will include the entire Boulder County, east and west, broad view. Remember, it's not going to come down to your neighborhood, but we're going to be able to take that assessment with these different layers and see where the greatest risk is, right? And everybody thinks they're all at risk. We are. But other areas are at more risk. Where's more vegetation? Where's there more infrastructure, right? And don't forget that in the urban areas and anywhere where you have home after home after home, that your homes are part of the fuels model, right? Once that home starts on, then it goes from home to home to home, right? So we want to identify on a broad level, hey, over here coming from the southeast or the southwest, this home could really, or this neighborhood could really be affected if all the fire fuels and weather came together. Okay. County assessment, again, these are all the things that we're going to include in it. And this could be, it could vary, right? One of the newer things that we have the ability to do, and we're not going to do the assessment, right? We're going to hire the professionals to do it, is ember zones. Embers are the threat to your home, right? It's not that flaming front, it's those embers that are coming and catching that fence on fire or your roof or whatnot, or getting in somewhere. So we have the ability to maybe go, wow, this could really produce a lot of embers. Take everything with a grain of salt, right? Because this isn't the silver bullet that comes out of all this, but it helps us to plan and prepare. And again, being more situationally aware, right? Right? That doesn't mean you sit home and go, oh my gosh, this says we're in the highest risk right here. I'm not going anywhere. It's just so you're aware, right? Just so you're aware. Obviously, we have lots of goals, and our number one is to save lives, right? It's number one. And we want to protect our properties, critical infrastructure and watersheds. And again, don't forget, we have to focus on west and east, right? If a mega fire comes through, the left hand or the St. Vrain watershed, then that affects all of you downstream, right? We also have to think, well, where are the power lines and infrastructure down here, the cell phone towers, the power, which all goes out, that's going to affect you down here. So we want to make sure that our county goals are broad enough, but also include everything for protection, right? The best we can. It's again, nothing is 100%. Mother Nature has the hand, right? If everything is in line, we're not going to stop something, right? But we can be much better prepared by implementing. All right, we want to link and incorporate local CWPPs. Like Ben said, we have 14 fire protection districts with another one coming on board that have CWPPs. They're either current, they're becoming current, or we're trying to get them to become current. They will be linked into the CWPP, okay? As well as our most current HMP, the Hazard Mitigation Plan. That means you could go to that link and you're like, hey, I'm in the Mountain View Fire Protection District. Hey, look, they've identified what we need locally. The county plan won't go down to that level, but those plans will. And again, we hope with the county plan that buys time that we get more folks to do local. Now, will we have a lot of redundancy and some overlap? Absolutely, but there's no harm in that if we're all identifying risks and trying to serve you all, right? Collaboration, prioritizing fuels reduction, recommended methods for reducing structural ignitability. Now, I know everybody in their mind is like, prioritize fuel reduction. Yes, is that a coin statement for the West? Absolutely, but that doesn't mean we can't do that here. It's going to look different. These are landscaped yards. Homes are closer, right? You got streets, you got all kinds of stuff that they don't have up in the mountains. So we're trying to figure out how do we do fire protection beyond in the wildland urban interface that best serves you. A fuels treatment is not going to be the same, or defensible space is not going to be the same down here as it is with a home in the forest, right? We have to look at your structure. Yeah, we're not going to come and say, okay, take down that maple, take down, these prize trees that you spent thousands of dollars to plant, but you can be aware that that wooden fence or that wooden deck, or hey, maybe we should build with a fire class A roof, or hey, maybe we can cover our vents. We need to figure out what you all need and start that outreach and education out here. Oh, sorry. Monitoring, thank you. And one thing that we wanted, and has been hit upon, is in the past, these CWPPs were written and they were dusty documents, right? We laugh at that because they just sat there. We are dedicated through our Boulder County Fireshed group to create a CWPP committee. And we'd like to revisit this CWPP, and it's updated every year, right? That, so we go, okay, hey, town of Louisville put in this outreach and education program, and they said they were gonna hit like 10 communities, and that's listed in our CWPP. Did they do it? Let's check that off, and then maybe let's replace it with something new. It's all for funding. It's all for that, not all, I should take that back. This will help if we keep it updated. One, to keep planning and succeeding, but also leveraging funds, right? As Ben said, all federal grants and some of our state grants require that projects are identified in a CWPP. Okay, so that's what we're trying to strive for. If we could do it tomorrow and get them all listed in there, and then you apply for the next grant round, we do that. Well, we can't, but that is what we're working towards. So again, just so you understand, identifying and prioritization. Yes, our minds are focused as fire dogs. Our minds are focused up to the west. That's where the fires have happened here in Colorado. Now we're shifting. We're still focusing on there because we cannot forget them. And we also want to focus on the grasslands, right? And what does that mean? Community-wide projects, multiple landowners, right? Both grasslands and forested. That could mean education campaigns, right? For urban areas. Do you all know what a Firewise community is? Boy, if you learn that, then you'd have a spark plug in your HOA. And it's just a recognition program, but it kind of gets people motivated. Does that mean that you're going to go prune all your trees? We're not in the urban areas, but you're going to go, oh, well, maybe if I'm rebuilding, I'm not going to plant that tree right over here. Or, hey, maybe I'm going to use a different deck material. Right? So that's what that Firewise program does. It provides a lot of tools for landowners what to do around your home. Situational awareness, right? Becoming community champions and ambassadors and train the trainers, right? Maybe we can identify some of those outreach and education programs within our CWPP, right? So then if that kind of funding comes around, we can get you some funding and maybe we can get something going out here. And just so you understand that something Boulder County is doing. We're building an outreach and education program specifically for the Eastern Plains. And we hope then that we can educate all of you, then and you're like, oh, this is really cool. I'm gonna go talk to all my neighbors about it, right? And we keep that going, right? We got to work together. And then identify, map, and prioritize fuel treatments projects. Again, don't let that throw you off down here. That could be, again, hey, maybe county open space is applying for some funding so that they're doing some kind of rotational mitigation in that open space right behind our community, right? Those kind of things. And then finalize the boring steps, right? We have to get this passed off by the county commissioners and final approval. We get it submitted up to the CSFS to hold into their archives. And then we want to do project development and implementation. That's really our goal, is to get this in place. And we have many partners that we're working with. It's not just the county, it's Colorado State Forest Service, it's the fire protection districts, it's the watershed groups, it's the conservation districts, it's the US Forest Service, which may not affect all of you down here, but they're aware. We have a lot of groups. Back in the day, we were in our silos. This is what we do, and we don't work with anybody else. that is really shifting. That attitude is shifting. We can't do it alone. So it's all hands on deck. So partnering and collaborating is how we're gonna get this. And that includes all of you out here in the eastern folks. And then again, that monitoring to keep it up to date. One thing that we're considering for this CWPP update is form a citizens advisory committee, short term, right? We haven't, we're talking about that right now. And so it would have to be interested folks, right? Of you folks and folks across the eastern and the western slope, no, not western front slope, to come in and help advise. It would be like, hey, here's our biggest concerns so that we hear you. Our concern is, will that be redundant to the survey and the public meetings that we are doing? We don't know, but that is something that we're thinking about. So heads up on that. And if we do form that, we'll be reaching out for volunteers. We're probably looking for about 10 to 12 folks throughout the county to sit on that citizens group, right? And it will be short-term, 3-4 months while we're developing the CWPP. Again, we want to make sure that we're hearing all of you and folks up in the western. So that is it.
All right, great.
Questions?
Yes, weird. So I think, Lisa, are we gonna probably need to use the mic so that folks, okay. Yep. We will do that. Let's take some questions in the room. Yeah, let's have, actually, why don't we have the chiefs give a quick, they're gonna give a couple minutes, speak for a couple minutes, and that way if you have questions for any of the fire chiefs, then you can ask questions of everyone who's in the room. So let's see, let's start with Chief John Wilson here in Louisville. And then we'll have Chief Keeblong, who will talk about the
Mountain View Fire Protection
District. Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming out. We can't do anything. We can do a lot of things a lot better when we have participation. So first of all, thank you for coming out. I think Ben and Meg did a wonderful job on this CWPP. So who's from Louisville? So am I talking to most people? Okay, so Mountain View, you can just sit down, I'll do the rest, so. Just kidding. So so we have a special district. I'm not part of the city. I am in a special district, but most of my protection is within the city. And so I work closely with the city on a lot of items. Mountain View, they have a huge area and they go from Flagstaff, all the way down over to Erie, over to Meade, on the other side of Longmont. So they have a tremendous different aspects of their fire district. Whereas we here in Louisville, you all know that the city sits here and open space surrounds us. So do we have, so let me back up a little bit, is so CWPP was really pushed for the forest. And I used to work up in the mountains a little bit, in the Vale and the Beaver Creek area. And they had these kind of plans up there because we had a lot of forests and stuff up there. When I came down here, I knew what the risks were. This is the grasslands basically, but we really didn't have a lot of data, and we had to change our mindset. And I think that's what we're doing. And I think that we, as Louisville, are going to participate with the county with their plan. Now, do we really need a separate plan to get down to the granular level? And we are. It might not be the full plan that they've described, but the city has done a lot of great work just recently. They're hiring a person to do assessment, risk assessment. So we're starting that process. So if we know where the risks are, then we can start thinking about some mitigation. And mitigation is not just mow all the grass. And it's impossible. You can't do that. But there are a lot of different suggestions on what we can do. We can hire goats and cattle We can put prairie dogs out there because for some reason we found out that where prairie dogs are living, the fire didn't move as fast or as quick. So it's just, there's a lot of things we can do. We can do prescribed fire, and that scares everyone. That scares me. There are two things that scare me in wildfire. One of them is someone's using a chainsaw. Another one is putting fire on the ground. I've seen too many injuries and too much destruction with those two items. But fire is good for the environment. And so it is something that we have to accept, possibly. And there are a lot of different mitigations that we're working on, that we're collaborating with the county and the watershed and other fire districts to get to that point. So let's see. So evacuation notices, we're working on that. We've really upgraded those. Escape routes, we're identifying those. And so a lot of the items that they talked about, we are starting to put together. And now comes the educational part to get that information out to everyone. And that's what these series are all about, is emergency notifications, the assessment, the risk assessment, the risk at homes, lessons learned that we learned from, and are changing our ways of doing things. Marshall Fire was we can't prepare. So let me back up for a second. So even if we do all the stuff, if we have a really bad day, your house could still burn down. I mean, we have to, that's reality. And we have to realize that. But what we're doing with the CWPP and all this education that we're doing is trying to make our homes and communities a little bit safer. So when we do have a real bad day, it's not going to be as bad as we had on December 30th, 2021. Okay. What else? Talking about hardening of houses, fences and those sort of things. We're working, fire district doesn't have a lot of power of, you have to do that, you have to do this. But we're working with the city, and we all realize that takes money. And a lot of people don't have that money. That's another reality check. So I can't say, you're going to do this, but if you don't have the money to do it, you can't. But we have grants out there that might help us down the road. We're looking at what kind of landscaping you do have around your house. What kind of items do you have on your house? What kind of roofs, what kind of siding, what kind of those kind of items? And then we're trying to decide, okay, if you remodel your kitchen, does that mean I have to tear out my fence and my roof and everything else? No, that's not reality. That's not realistic. But if you're going to maybe do half your house or more, we're not sure what that is yet. Then maybe it tricks into, hey, you'll need to do this upgrade to help protect your house and help your neighbor to protect also. Okay. The last item that we're going to find, some neighborhoods only have one way in and one way out. That's just the way it was designed. So we're trying to work on ways to try maybe using open space to maybe have other ways out of your community. So that's number one. Number two is if you look at how close your homes are, if I got one house started, your really exposure is from that other house that's on fire, or the house that's on fire. Okay. Our houses are so close. I can't say that if I'm going to go into these neighborhoods and say, okay, you need to destroy your house and move. You need to move your house. You need to do this. That's not realistic either. So, but what we're doing is, if you think about it, I bring 4 apparatus, 20 people to a house fire. And what we're doing is we're trying to knock the fire down inside the house or outside the house, and we're trying to protect houses around it. So that's what we do. And we've got mutual aid, we've got auto aid with our districts around us, North Metro from Broomfield. I can call people from Denver and they'll be up here, not like right away, but within a half hour to 45 minutes, they'll be up here to help us. So we're working on those. We've had those in play on December 30th. But the unfortunate part of it is the fire was from the other side of Superior all the way up to South Boulder Road. That's a huge area with lots of things on fire. And we just didn't have the resources to take care of that. So I'm gonna stop there because I think I threw some stuff out. I'll turn it over to Keith Long from Mountain View Fire Protection District.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm Keith Long. I'm the assistant chief. I run pretty much all special teams, whether it's hazmat, wildland, tech rescue. December 30th, I was there with Chief Wilson, some of his folks. I've been in fire in 28 states, hurricanes, tornadoes. Never had that in almost 40 years of doing this business. It's an anomaly. Are we having more? You look at Black Forest, yes. Look at Waldo Fire down out of the Springs. We are apt to have more. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Let's talk about CWPP. So Mountain View, we have 220 square miles. As Chief alluded to, we go from up Gross Lake down through El Dorado, Superior, I-25 corridor up to Meade. Very diverse. So we're going to be doing in some of our areas the fuels treatment up on Flagstaff from Gross. Down here, we're looking at more of the grassland component. But everything that Ben and everybody has talked about tonight, we're going to be doing. This isn't going to happen overnight. We could have had 1,000 fire trucks there at the Marshall Fire. It wouldn't have mattered. I'm sorry. 100-mile-an-hour winds. We had embers going a mile. Okay. We're very sorry about that. It happened. Talk about house hardening. I'll probably get in trouble, but I'm going to say it anyway. A lot of the houses I saw that were burning, I was out there with the concrete roof, stucco. We had 2x4s on fire going through windows. So you're talking about the debris in that. In the end of December, we finally got back our last fire engine that was damaged. I think we had almost $200,000 damage just the fire engines from the wind, from all the debris. We lost 2 civilians that day. But the best part, no first responders, fire personnel, police officers got hurt or killed. I can sleep at night because of that. Getting back to the CWPP, what we're talking about. I always use 3 C's. I was giving the chief a hard time. First one's communication. We have to communicate, open. It's not one way, it's both ways. We have to coordinate. What do you think the third one is? Collaborate. So what we're looking at is we have 7 AHJs, authorities having jurisdiction, Superior, Erie, Niwot, Meade, etc. They're all going to have different priorities. So we're going to team up with Meg. We're going to parallel the county's program on their CWPP. So we're going to be down, if they're at the 10,000 feet, kind of the macro, we're going to be at the micro. We're going to be at the 5,000 foot. But everything we're talking about doing is going to come from the people. Town Superior, they're going to have all their GIS mapping. Town Superior, what are your any of your priorities? John alluded to, or Chief Wilson, excuse me, alluded to mutual aid auto aid. Marshall Fire, we had 83 different districts, fire departments, as far away as Durango came in to help. So it might not be, if you live in Louisville, and I know most of you do, so I really don't want to go home unless you want me to, Chief. But you might see, it doesn't matter if it's Mountain View, because guess what, Louisville, Broomfield, they come into Mountain View's district. We cannot afford, it would cost me prohibitive to have a fire truck on every corner in every house. So you're going to get people there. It might not be Louisville, but guess what? That's okay. We count on Louisville, Broomfield, just depending on where we are. We also have 3 counties we're writing this for. I was talking specific to Mountain View. We're Jefferson County, Boulder, and then also Weld. So it's going to be an interesting ride. Any questions for either Chief Wilson or myself? We do really appreciate you being here.
There are folks on the phone.
See a couple questions online and then we see a couple hands raised. So Megan, I don't know if you want to moderate all the
Yeah,
questions.
let's do one of them right here. You have questions?
I do. I would be curious to hear opinions around prescribed burn as a preventative measure from a grassland perspective specifically. And again, I know that that's a touchy topic, but from what I read, I do think it's something that we ought to consider more deeply.
Okay, comments on that? All right, Maggie. All right.
Great question. Fire is an incredible tool. Grasses are broadcast burning is real common, especially if you look at agriculture and farming, right? They do it all the time. What is scary is that we would do it behind your communities. Not that it can't be controlled, and I'll let these guys speak upon it. But just so you know, we have a, from our BOCO fire shed, Boulder County Fire Shed Group. We are developing a, not a best management practices, but a grasslands pros and cons of the different management types. That we're also bringing into grasslands ecosystem ecology, because that's, the grasslands are, most of them are native, so it's important to try to balance that out, right? So prescribed fire is the best way to keep those grasslands healthy and go, you know, and vibrant. So that's just something we are working on and hope to get out. We are also partnering with Colorado State Forest Service, who will be developing a grasslands best management practices document that will cover all of the state of Colorado, not just the Front Range. It will have a lot of science behind that, right? The prescribed fire, the grazing, the noxious weed, all those things with a lot of science. Not that ours won't have science, it's going to be a quick and dirty document coming out. I'll let the fire experts talk about prescribed.
So you bring up a great question. And I'm gonna put some history to it. 200 years ago, we never had mistletoe, we never had beetle kill. Our forests were healthy. Our grasslands were healthy. Native Americans, lightning would hit, it would go, it would reduce what we call the fuel loading of that acres. I'm a big proponent of burning. Sometimes with the litigious society we're in, we have to go through a bunch of hoops. I'm not saying we can't do that, but with smoke management people, Will County is much different than Boulder. Just about any time in March, April, you're gonna see a lot of the farmers' ditches burning. They're not held to any standard. So if we have a red flag day, which means low humidity, it just, I know you know, but other people might. So if we have low humidity, high winds, high temp, and the fuels are cured, so like our grasses right now, that if you can see them, thank goodness we have snow, by the way, but if you can see them, they're brown, so they're cured, ready to burn. The big thing is fire is very good when it's done correctly. And I gotta admit what Chief Wilson said, for me, when we put fire on the ground, typically when I go out on the big fires across the country, my name goes on that. So I wanna make sure it's done right. Remember, fire is, I guess for the best term, it's very good when it's used correctly, but a lot of the burns we've had, whether it be the Hyde Park fire, whether it be the Hayman fire, it's burned so hot, it has pretty much sterilized the soil. So now if you look at Northern California right now with all the floods, why are they doing that? Forest won't hold, the soil won't hold any moisture. So it's a double-edged sword. It's a great tool. When I started in 1980, I'm aging myself. We didn't have water on our brush trucks. We had drip torches. It's a lost art. We need to move back that way.
I think you covered it. So yeah, it's a great tool and it's something that we'll definitely look at. And we've done some in the city of Louisville in the past. So.
We're gonna take one here and then we'll come back to you, okay?
Rocky Riviera, I just unmuted you. You should have to unmute on your end and then you can ask your question. You'll have to unmute on your end, Rocky.
I think the only question I have is related to the wind. I mean, I've lived in Boulder County for 40 years and 100-mile-an-hour wind is common in Boulder. So all these plans, you know, maybe it's going to help, but you're going to have winds. It's going to continue the winds. And all these people in Louisville, it's the winds that carried it.
Okay,
So I guess
thanks.
I don't really have a question. I'm just like the emphasis on the wind was the big factor.
Okay, thanks, Rocky. I mean, I think that's an important point and dynamic in planning. Did you want to say something about that, Ben?
Not necessarily about that, but I did want to back to the prescribed fire. So without boring you with all the different groups and things going on in the county, most practitioners would promote prescribed fire for the ecological benefits and the fuels reduction side. But I'd say if you think that's important, you'd like to see that happen, come engage, please come to meetings. Part of that is just hearing from you, but one of the challenges practitioners like us have is takes a lot of time, because there's a lot of liability involved, right? So that just is what it is. Sometimes it's just a lack of capacity. But more so, it's just if smoke's not in the air regularly, then when it is in the air, it catches people off guard. So just as a natural resource management community, there's a big push to get the word out and just teach people about it. And that means getting far underground. So we, I say we, mostly the county, the city, do a lot of broadcast burns, burning grasslands. So we, as their fellow agencies, collaborators with them, is the effort to try to say, hey, this happened, it was successful, it achieved these goals, and to make people understand that. So when we want to try to burn west of town here, people are more aware of the benefits and how it can be done. So if you want to see it happen, please come and engage.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions about the CWPP. Normally, like in business, a lot of people will put off going through a risk assessment because many times they're heavily regulated businesses. And if they discover risk, they then have to address the risk. So what is the governing body that manages CWPP? Where does the CWPP go where somebody would say, yes, we accept this risk, there's 4 ways to deal with risk. So somebody has to decide how they're going to deal with the risk. And a lot of us can be finances. So the next question is, so where's all the funding come from?
There's a lot in there.
2 simple ones there.
So where does the CWPP go? One, it sits with the entity that created it, developed it, so they can implement it. And the core team, the people who sign off of it, they have to review, edit, and approve that CWPP. It doesn't get signed. So there's many entities. We have experts of all levels who are on that core team, right? So, and that is why we must do that collaboration and that outreach to the public, because we want you to know what that means, right? And it's a planning document. And I always say, I'm so tired of planning. We plan. But we really, our goal is to implement what goes in there, because the funding out there, the state, the federal and local funding, it's here. We said a year ago, it's coming down the train tracks. It's here. It is shifting slowly. There's FEMA grants out there for structure, home hardening. It's not as robust. Again, remember, we used to make fires in the West. We're trying to get some of those grant fundings and the legislation that will do some kind of rebate or some kind of incentive. Will they pay for a brand new house that's home hardened? And what Chief said here, that's not 100% bullet, right? That's going to protect your home. Or we're trying, right? We're a small voice here, but if legislation and you come to these meetings and they hear, right? And we can push that up to our commissioners, and they can push it up further. That does not go unheard, especially Colorado State Forest Service, who works with legislation so closely, right? That state forester knows, well, oh my gosh, now we have to address, we had Waldo, Black Forest, now Marshall Fire. How can we get some more funding that really applies not just to the wooded areas, the forest areas, but to the rest? So it is shifting slowly. And again, FEMA is out there. It's a lot to get FEMA, right? But FEMA is out there. Those are great things. And there is funding to help match. Can't match federal with federal dollars, but you can match state, county, or other local dollars with federal programs to help offset what is required, those required matches on there. So I don't know if that answers.
So, sorry, I'll speak loud enough.
Yeah.
What entity then is responsible for funding this plan? Is it at a county level? Is it at a
Good
state level? Is it a state and federal level?
We applied for a grant
Okay, so.
to get this funded. If we don't get the grant, we are looking at other county funds that we're trying to get it funded. If it doesn't get funded, we're still moving forward with it. We just have to adjust what our budget is for that. But we did apply for a federal grant, and we've been waiting to hear from that. So, yeah.
Yeah, just to add a little bit onto that, Commissioner Jones had a talking point, he just recently retired, but when you look at just the mountains, and it certainly would play out down here. If we wanted to address all the risks that we identify as communities, as practitioners, county, just within Boulder County, if we wanted to address all those risks, just looking at the fuels. Large part of my job is working with forests. If we just focused on that, do you remember napkin math, but it's $20 million a year for the next 20 years. Right, so we don't have that. I think that's even selling it short. But what's happened in the last few years, I've been here for 14 years. I've been with State Forest Service for 17. And there's always been an acknowledgement from our legislators, from land managers that there's risk, right? We're not short of any risk assessment. Like, especially here in Boulder County. Most assessments done, you would see Boulder County's high risk almost across the board. So there's no shortage of risk assessment. It's where does that money come from? And so more so than ever before, after the 2020 fires, the state legislature upped the funding for one of our state grants from what used to be about $1 million a year, money coming from oil and gas severance. Right. So you're at the whims of whether or not that was there. Move that program into a line item in the state budget from $1 million to $8 million a year. Okay. That's across the state. So that's been an improvement. That's where the money's coming from. There's a whole slew of federal money. Some of it's stimulus related, some of it BIL related. But we're talking about what used to be grants that we could get locally and apply for. You asked about who's responsible. We all are. It's a group effort. We used to be capped out at like $300,000 per ask. Doesn't get a lot done. It gets a little, but we're now talking about from 300,000 to tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah, and just on that, what we applied for was the federal grant, Community Wildfire Defense Grant. That came out really fast, and we were like, whoa, everybody's like, it was for CWPPs or projects that were identified in an updated CWPP. So we're all like scrambling, oh crap, right? So we're behind the 8 ball, but that money, they're having another round, right? The next round's coming out too fast. It's actually coming out beginning of May. And we're like, wait, we haven't even heard if we get funding for this CWPP. So that is federal grant money that they are gonna fund, and really no cap within that if projects are identified in the CWPP, that's why we're gonna be project forward on the county CWPP. Can get some funding, and again, is that gonna replace your roof? No, all right, that's just not realistic, but will it provide some other kinds of projects out here? That's why we want to hear from you, and we want to hear from the chiefs and the experts and the municipalities. What is that? Maybe the municipality needs their own outreach and education campaign or wildfire mitigation group so that they can service more locally, right? We don't know yet. So we're trying to figure that out, but that's a big pot of money. And then this is more for the West, but there is other money coming down from the US Forest Service, right? That's going to protect your water. So there's the infrastructure bill that's coming down. And then the legislation, like Ben said, is continually, the pressure is on them because of the frequency and the size of disasters that we've had here, not only in Boulder County, but in Colorado. So 10 years ago, we'd be going, yeah, we have no money. Who wants it, right? Who can apply for it? Now we're like, oh my gosh, here it comes. How can we best get it out to folks, right? And we're here. There are folks that can help communities apply for those grants, right? And if those come, you just ask questions, call Ben all the time. But there are folks that can help, with grants, right? And get you through that process or even write it for you and get us out there. And if we're like, nah, I just don't think this is gonna hit the criteria this year, maybe next year, but really reach out. There are folks out there to help with that. So.
Great. Next up, we'll take an online question from Larry Donner. Larry, you'll have to unmute on your side.
Thank you. First, I want to say I'm really happy, and I want to acknowledge the fact that the CWPP is recognizing grasslands as an issue in addition to the forest. I don't think that the Marshall Fire is as unique as some people would like to think. I'm 73 years old. I've lived in Colorado all my life. High winds have been common from Fort Collins to Pueblo in the foothills. So high winds are a fact of life. Droughts are a fact of life. The thing that has changed is the amount of farm and ranch lands that have been taken out of service, turned into subdivisions and adjacent open spaces, which are in essence fields left in a fallow state, totally unmanaged. My home was fire resistive roof, James Hardy siding, double pane windows, no deck on the back, as was my neighbor's home directly to the west. They're both holes in the ground right now. So my question has to do with fuel reduction and mitigation on the open spaces adjacent these urban areas. I want to really have some input on what's going to be done with that, because the reality in Boulder County is air quality standards aren't going to allow for many prescribed burns. I was involved in the fire service my entire career. When it came to prescribed burns, more of them were scratched because of air quality concerns than any other reason. So something needs to be done. Either lands need to be put back in agricultural use, or they need to be mowed, or they need to be grazed down. And I just want to emphasize that fuel reduction is a big deal for me, because if you can keep the fires out of the neighborhoods, you can better protect those neighborhoods. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Larry. Let's see, Meg's gonna start here.
Yes, we hear that loud and clear, and I know our parks and open space have been doing some mowing. But understand, and this is why we put this grasslands work group together, mowing is not gonna be the end all answer. we have to figure that out. One, financially, two, strategically, and three, which method can we keep rotated, right? That is one, capacity, funding, and really realistically, can we keep up with this and keep your open spaces healthy, right? Those are many things that we're going through right now. I agree, something does have to happen. I know we're working with the ditch companies. Our open space is working with the ditch companies. They're on that grasslands group. And this is opportunity that maybe that they can apply for some funding to do some ditch mitigation. Just like we preach around homes and up in the mountains, we have to figure out long-term management. We say the same things to folks who we say, hey, thin, or hey, clean out your needles out of your gutters and whatnot. We have to figure out a one-time shot's not gonna do it. Grass is gonna grow back. So how can we, as a county, or even as homeowners, do long time management? So that is a challenge and a question that we are talking about quite frequently and readily right now within the county. How are we gonna do that? There are, I forget how many acres, 30,000 acres of open space, maybe more. Probably don't quote me on that. I'm probably off on that. There is a lot of open space to manage. Now, one of the things that we are gonna do is when we do that hazard assessment, we go, wow, this area right here backs up to this community. Let's focus on that, right? So it's gonna take some time. And again, that's not the magic bullet. We have to figure out how we can do this long-term. It's not, okay, we're gonna do it this year and then there's no smoke in the air and everybody's happy, right? We have to be able to manage it and keep those grasslands healthy at the same time. Protection and healthy grasslands. Just like when we go up to the forest, people are like, oh, please don't cut our trees, right? So we have to answer that same thing. So that is in the talks. We are thinking about it.
Thanks, Meg, and Larry, and for those in the room, this is Megan Davis with the City of Louisville. Our open space team is also participating in those conversations, and I know that Superior is as well. I believe as well as the Lafayette open space. So these conversations are happening countywide with the open space professionals to try to learn some of those best practices around that ongoing management. So appreciate those comments. Okay, we got another one in the room.
Hi, I'm Mandy Mayfield, and we lost our house in the fire. We noticed that most of the homes that burned down, right, were around the open space. We actually are fortunate enough to have it on two sides of our home, so we used to think that that was a great thing, and now we're looking at it a little bit differently. And as we talk, and I'm going to bring this down to the community level a little bit, but as we talk to our neighbors, you know, one of our biggest concerns are the cedar fences that are right along, right between our houses and the open space. Most of us can't afford to go to a higher fire resistant material right now. And so, you know, we would like to know if there's an opportunity to get some of this funding to do types of things like that, because I think this would be considered a would-be, because it's at the interface between, you know, urban and grasslands. And then, so I don't know if you have more details about like how we could at a community level apply for those funds. And then the second thing is, I thought I heard earlier in the presentation that we had to have a CWPP written about 10 years, but in the last 10 years to get funding, and ours was written for Boulder County in 2011. So it seems like now there's like a time lag, right, to get any funding. And I know you're working on it, and I appreciate that transparency. But how can we get funds sooner rather than later, and you know, and apply for those? Because it sounds like we're not even eligible to apply.
Don't despair. It's a great question.
Okay.
And there are, and again, I'm just learning about but there are some other House bill legislation coming around that will be hopefully, and again, I don't wanna excite you without me having the right information, because I just heard this like 2 hours before I got here. That would, help fund some county money. We are putting together a, forest and grassland grant program. We hope to roll that out no later than June. If we can do it sooner, we will. But we have to go through all the steps, right, to put that program together. The county program will be matched with other grant programs, right? We know that people are like, hey, if some project comes around, again, I don't wanna get myself in trouble. But if something comes around and we have a good project and your community works with somebody and you apply for another grant, we're not gonna go, oh, no, let's get that funded and get that project done. The urban funding it's tricky, right? Because it's like, oh my gosh, if we can't build fire resistant fences for 10,000 people, right? So we have to figure that out as a community. Probably not giving the answer that you want, but there's other funding, right? That is coming down the pipe that you don't need a CWP. You can use the county's recent HMP, the Hazard Mitigation Plan, right? That's why we're trying to build up our outreach and education program specifically for all of you. It's going to focus here in the municipalities in the Eastern Plains. We're also expanding our Wildfire Partners program we are going to extend it out into the suburbs, the urban areas where you sign up, you get your home assessed, you get recommendations for home hardening. With that program, we are trying to figure out an incentive or rebate money to the landowner. It's not going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, but we are trying to figure out if we can work in partnership with DOLA to help match that incentive. So maybe it's not tens of thousands of dollars, but maybe it's $5,000, $6,000, right? We're just in the talks with that. We just got off the phone with DOLA, and I know Jim Webster is going to talk more about this in one of his talks. That's some things we're considering. Nothing ever happens fast enough, and we're sorry about that. We know that you guys are hurting and you've incurred a lot of pain, a lot of loss, and a lot of expense. But we are trying to figure out what we can do to get more assistance out to you, right? So that's what's in the works right now. And again, once we get this grant program going, maybe you're working with somebody out in your community and they recommend you to apply for a grant. And the county has some matching money to match that, to offset, so you don't have to pay anything out of your pocket for that. That's what we're looking for, leveraging those county monies to those other grant monies. So I mean, in the old days, it's 50% match to the landowner. So let's say your community applies for $300,000. Your community, would have to come up with the other 300,000, right? So we're trying to see if we can offset that with the county grant program. That answer.
Let me jump in just for a second too. So DOLA is Department of Local Affairs. So that's number one. Number two is, and I was just talking to Lisa and we'll be talking to the city about this, is maybe you don't replace the whole fence, but maybe it's the 5 feet from the house outward. And I'm sure Ben could maybe give you more details on fire-wise, because that's some of the things they have zones and so on. But maybe you just start with that first, because then the fire doesn't carry the fence all the way to the house and then a house that goes. Maybe it stops with that 5 feet or something.
But I don't want it to carry my neighbor.
True, so, yeah, it's a fine line, yeah, that's it.
I have a CWPP follow-up question. So if a community, a neighborhood like this, during the CWPP process, would that be considered a project that could be included in the CWPP if there were, say, 25 homes adjacent to open space, they all wanted, is that something that, you know, could be considered as like a project and then potentially eligible for funding?
Yeah, so because it's county, it's that 10,000 view. If your fire district has a CWPP, you want to get that level in there. That doesn't mean we won't put it in there. We're probably gonna have to get it with it. We have to figure out how to get, we can't list every, you know, HOA and go, here's all their projects, because that's not what the county level is meant to do. That's more on your fire protection district. But that's where we want you to come to these public meetings and we want to get your input, and we will put that survey out sooner than the public meetings will help. I know, again, this is not moving fast enough, but we have to figure out at the county level how we can capture, good question, but that's really at that local level. And I know Louisville is working, you guys are working hard on that.
Kind of related to that, so you asked who's in charge or who's responsible, we all are. When I work in the mountains with communities that have CWPPs, you know, the fire protection districts are usually the champions trying to do work in their own community. Out of my office, there's me and up till a couple months ago, one other person doing this, so it's a capacity issue. We're growing, but the picture I'm trying to paint is you can have a CWPP in a list, but if the people involved with priority 2 or 3 aren't on board, we're not going to not do number 3. So get it in, get your input, engage, get it in the plan. And then if you find yourself in priority 6 and we just can't get our ducks in a row for priority 1, guess what? We're going to try to do 6. So I would just say engage and make your needs known. So it's in there, and then keep engaging, sure. And find the right people to do the job and just to find the different funding sources, and it'll happen.
We have a couple, yeah, we have a couple hands raised online. Next, we'll take Ralph Brown. Ralph, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I was just looking at the participating agencies. I saw Boulder County Parks and Open Space, but I don't think I saw Boulder City Open Space and Mountain Parks. Is that correct? Are they not participating?
They are participating. City of Boulder, I just didn't break it.
Yeah, City of Boulder also includes open space and mountain parks participation.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Okay, did someone in the back have one previously? Okay. Well, let's see, I'm not sure who was first. Okay.
So I had another follow-up to this, the line of discussion we were just on, and we lost our home, right? Sorry, I'm pointing at my former home. Thank you so much for being here. This was way more emotional than I remembered, or than I expected for this. And just the whole idea, we're on a cul-de-sac in a circle, and my house is, all of our houses are 10 feet apart, 5 feet from the setback. So removing fuel from 5 feet is hard when you're 10 feet apart. So, so my three aspects sort of this funding question. One is if someone could address where the new county funding is, how that plays into here. And then just a point of clarification, I guess I'm not clear. Does the LFPD or Louisville, do we have a CWPP or will we have our own?
I'll answer that one.
Okay, so, and so then both of those sort of connect to Mandy's point is, I believe in Louisville, we have 240 houses that have been permitted out of our 500.
Not even near
something
that,
like
yeah.
that, almost half. My whole cul-de-sac is underway. 2 years from now to get funding through this process. We all will have made, we already have our first cedar fence back in my neighborhood, down upwind of me. It's too late. It's cedar all the way to their house. So what can we do in the short term? We've got half of our burned houses that will be built back in the next year or two. Thankfully, that's a joyful event, but these are great things for the next group of houses that will be under threat, but it's not going to be enough for us to sort of beef up our sense of security and safety and protection from the next, all these grasses are going to grow back like gangbusters this year. So how do we translate this to nearer term solutions?
All really good questions. I'm gonna leave the first one to last, the county money. I knew that was gonna come out tonight, and that's great, because I can answer that the best I can. And you're right, you know, I know Boulder County did do some updated their building codes, which requires a lot more expensive materials for landowners. And so that's a tough one, right? Because they implemented building codes and some more, I think it was roof, and I can't remember what it was, sorry. But you're right, it's a kind of too late. You're already building, people have already put in, grasses are gonna grow. And I know this might seem really kind of like, this, okay, that kind of placates me. You really need to get out and do outreach and education to folks, right? And I know that's not fast enough. Again, we are going to start that campaign. The more people know what fences are gonna do, and educate them, will that make them replace it or want them to make it replacement? We hope so, right? And it's not just fences, right? We know that county open space, we know the demand on them is to mow the grasses and keep those down. And again, those talks are in there. I can't give you a 100% answer on that, because the building's already happening. I know there are some neighborhoods that are building what they call green and fireproof. I sat on a webinar for that, and there were like 10 homes. 10 homes are not gonna do it, right? We have to start with the outreach and education. We have to start with the wildfire partners coming out and offering assessments to each of you so that you understand, or folks around you whose homes did not burn down. Right? We're trying to figure that out. So that's not even a straight answer, and I know that because we have a lot to figure out. It's not the trees now that are our challenge down here on the east, it's the cedar fences. It's your neighbors who don't care. You may put your, you may replace your fence with a fireproof fence and your neighbors might not, right? So it's the same challenges that we have up in the mountains that have translated down here in a whole different scenario. The 1A tax ballot measure, the wildfire mitigation tax, that did pass, is going to, like I said, we are developing a grasslands and forest grant program. I'm the lead on that with many other. We're going to have fire protection. We're having a wildfire advisory committee put together. So we're not just doing, the county's not just doing this in a vacuum. We have Colorado State Forest Service. We have the U.S. Forest Service. We have Department of Natural Resources. We have fire protection districts, both from the east and the west. And we're probably going to have a non-governmental entity there to advise how we shape up this program. One is going to be for fuels reduction in the forest. We have to keep our efforts there. Our other thought is to create a grant program with different criteria for the grasslands. That's not an idea, that is our goal. Again, can that happen fast enough? Government slow, right? We have to go through contracts and all kinds of stuff. But we're working fast to get that up and running. Our target is hopefully no later than June 1st, right? To get those grant programs going. Who can apply? You all, your communities. What won't it focus on? Individual homeowners.
Attention rec center guests, the time is now 7:45 and the rec center will be closing in 15 minutes. At this time, we ask that you plan your workout accordingly so that you may be out of the front door by 8 p.m. Again, the rec center will be closed and locked in 15 minutes. Thank you.
So what the grant money is meant to be, again, it's not a grant program that will fully fund, because the 1A won't just be for my grant program, right? It will be for the Wildfire Partners program to expand capacity for out here east, to expand in outreach and education, to come to HOAs and teach and get you all on board and knowledgeable. And we're trying to figure out where those other funding will go. The program that I'm going to put together is for larger projects, meaning it can't just, an individual landowner can't just apply for money. That happens with all grants, right? State, federal, local grants. Gone are those days, because we need larger, we need a whole community to apply for a grant, right? What that looks like for grasslands, and I'm sorry, urban, we don't know yet, but if that is, hey, we're gonna partner with our partners, Park and Open Space, and they're gonna apply for this grant, we're gonna fund the rest of that grant with that county money to put in some kind of management program in that open space, right? These are the ideas that we're coming up with. And so that's what we're working on right now. That's where a portion of that money goes.
So, we are working with the city, to develop our plan. I mean, they've already started their assessment, they're contracting per person to come out to do the assessment and that sort of stuff. So we're already starting the process. It will live within the city and the fire district. We're going to be cooperative, basically. The fences, I know that your HOA is applied for, redoing the, at least probably could speak better to this or Megan, about changing the, I forgot the name of it.
So yeah, working with many of you to change regulations regarding combustible fences within.
So,
within
but
the
we're
city.
working on that. Okay.
Yeah, so with regard, so we don't have a CWPP, we're under the counties, and which is gonna be, so I think, you know, what we've discussed is we're gonna have this wildfire risk assessment process. That's gonna give us some really good information about the public land speed. We're gonna be working with the county around the higher arching CWPP. And then I think we'll need to see if at that point there's value in having something, you know, more localized. And we have it in the past, because as we've talked about, you know, CWPPs weren't really designed to be completed for communities like ours, but if they're, if we look at this data and this information and we find that there is value, I mean, I think that's something that will be worth exploring, doing something more granular or localized. So it'll be an ongoing conversation, but first we'll participate in the county, see what that looks like, get the assessment data, and then work from there. Yeah.
Sorry, but because we gotta go get our last run in, but if there is a community within Louisville that is got a spark plug and you're all talking, you're like, hey, let's identify a broad we don't have the details, but we want to do this. Start thinking about that now, and let's get that in under Louisville in our CWPP municipality. So-and-so HOA wants to do this, right? Start thinking about that, because that's really, even though it's not that granular, if we've got that, we say, hey, town of Louisville, so-and-so HOA wants to do this, right? Let's get it in there. see if we can partner with open space and whatnot.
Great. So we have 2 more hands raised online, 1 more repeat. It looks like a couple more questions in the room, so we'll try and get questions maybe answered a little more quickly. Next up, we have Ash Taylor.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. First off, just wanted to thank you for hosting this and for everyone who is speaking and providing information. I'm probably belaboring this point too much because I think it's been mentioned in some way before, but I was just wondering if there are any fire mitigation actions planned for open space now that weren't in place prior to the Marshall fire, and if so, in what timeline? Because I completely understand the point of the long-term fire mitigation planning, but as has been mentioned, some factors are just not going to change: wind, dry combustible fuel, all of those things. So I would just really love to know if there's any kind of short-term action on that front. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ash. This is Megan Davis with the City of Louisville. So the City of Louisville, starting last summer, implemented a couple of different measures. We had our basically previous data around wildfire risk associated with open space properties. And so we did mowing with a 10-foot buffer around those property areas that were identified as high and medium risk. So we did that as sort of a stopgap measure, just sort of to do that until we have more data around what the best practices are. And then we do have that budgeted for this year until we get the wildfire. We'll probably do it once in the spring. We did it last year in the spring and the fall, maybe in August or September. And then we also have, we're also working on some grazing plans. And so we're looking at goats and or cattle in open space to do some kind of intermittent grazing to reduce the fuels and the weeds in those properties. So that's what we have planned in the meantime until we get some additional data for sort of a more long-term plan for what we can be doing in the city of Louisville.
Yeah, she actually, your comment. It's just a quick. And you didn't hit the ones that were hitting the Marshall fire for the mowing in the summer.
Yeah, I would have to look at the map. I can't.
It's the hospital.
Oh, okay,
The whole neighborhood.
I don't know
Except for
if that's open space, if it's
It
city open space that you're talking about. or if
between
it's-
our
if it's
houses
the-
and a Vista.
Okay, I would have to look. I don't have the map in front of me, but yeah, I think it was, yeah, I think we did post that online, but.
Okay, my name is Jill Minter and I live in the Mulberry neighborhood just down the hill. And my question is, in developing this longer term plan to try to be a little more efficient, or looking at kind of best practices elsewhere, are we looking out of state? Because I noticed that Utah has amazing firewise materials down to what flowers and shrubs you can plant in a suburban neighborhood that are more fire resistant. And I can't find anything like that available in Colorado that is designed for non-mountain communities, and at least after the fire when I was looking. And the other thing I noticed is like South Dakota, which is full of grassland. At the time of the Marshall fire, they had high alert warnings out for so many communities that they were at high fire risk and be careful with this and that, and, you know, be alert to what's happening around you. Because when the fire came and I warned all my neighbors that we had to evacuate, we did not get a warning, even though we were all signed up. They weren't aware of the risk. And I think we can really improve that by looking at what is done in grassland states. And I just think we have had such a bias towards mountain communities in this county, and there just wasn't enough information available.
Really great points. We are doing research in Nebraska, South Dakota, Utah, for our grasslands. We're gonna put the quick and dirty one out, and then we're doing the research on other states for our grasslands management. And I know that Ben can talk about what is on the Colorado State Forest Service website. There is a long library of Firewise material.
Your first question, we have it. I will tell you, it's being updated. Our plant materials list is old, so it's being updated, but.
And to that point, we can't really announce it yet, but there a lot of detail, but there is work happening regarding a landscape program for private properties to rebuild following Marshall Fire that will include both Firewise and Waterwise recommendations for you all. So stay tuned. There's a lot of happening behind the scenes that hopefully we'll be able to announce more formally later this spring.
And also not to steal your thunder, Colorado State Forest Service.
Attention Recreation Center, yes, the time is now 7:56 and the rec center closes in 4 minutes. Please head for the exit so we can wrap it up for tonight. Thank you.
We can take.
Colorado State Forest Service is going to be doing a specific campaign out into the eastern suburbs. So we are doing studies, right? And I know again, and we hear you. This isn't new, the fire in urban areas, it's new in Boulder County, but this kind of magnitude, right? So we have to have time to be able to address, but we hear it, we know you're in every conversation in our planning. So we are expanding, we're not just focusing on the west, we are gonna, so we want to hear you at those, we want to see you and hear you at those public meetings and on that survey.
Okay, unfortunately, we're not gonna be able to take any more questions this evening, but please, if you have questions, email them. You can email it to the city email address. It'll get sent to either Lisa or myself. And then we have these experts here at hand. I really want to thank Meg and Ben and the fire chiefs for being here tonight. Thank you so very much. Thank you all for coming and for hearing your questions and asking really great questions and feedback. And I hope that you can come to some of the other events too. We'll have a Firewise event, and then we'll have one on emergency preparedness and notifications. And then there will probably be some others. So stay tuned and watch for it. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, here. So just the next.